real freedom is not only paying attention and doing the best on the surface, but coming to the core of who you are, to that part that was always in the present, always the now, always transcended everything, because it was the awareness or the consciousness that held this up and let it play out. Lets the light and shadow and the good and the bad and the highs and lows and the left and the right and the blue and the gray and the white and the black and the green and the yellow, all that play out. That plays out. But underneath is this one presence that holds the space for everything. And when we shift our full attention away from that for a while to being in this, then we find that peace that transcends understanding. Well, this is a happy day. Because on this day we celebrate a lot of freedoms. One of those freedoms, of course, was started a long time ago with the Declaration of Independence. Is a freedom from England and freedom from being dominated by a power across the sea, by a king who didn't respond to them, by all the things that kept the colonies in their place. They signed a declaration on 1776 on July 4th that this country or these colonies would decide to leave England. Now, the writer of the primary writer of the Declaration of Independence was Thomas Jefferson. And Thomas Jefferson was a brilliant man, and he was famous for architecture as well as for starting the University of Virginia, was quite the patriot, a man of science, lots of things. Brilliant, high-minded, and also a slaveholder, as were 1/3 of the people who signed the Declaration of Independence. So one of the things we find at that time was that the freedoms that we were talking about in the Declaration of Independence were not equally spread across all the population. They were really reserved for the people who were much more like Thomas Jefferson, landowners, white, free. So that's how the country started. And it's been a long time, and over time we have been expanding those who we enfranchise as equal and deserving of freedom. Prominently, with slavery being such a big part of this country, that became a big enough issue that we had a civil war to decide if we were going to continue to have slaves in this country or to let everyone be free. And during that time, 1863, Abraham Lincoln signed the Emancipation Proclamation. That did not actually release all the enslaved. The last people to hear about it came 2 years later, after the Civil War was over, when a general came down to the Galveston area and let everyone know there that they were free. That is why we celebrate Juneteenth. It happened, I think, on the 17th of June, 1865. And we celebrated on the 19th of June. I'm not sure I got those dates exactly right, but you get the gist that this celebrates the moment when the last person in the United States that was enslaved was told they were free. It was interesting when I was reading the history of this. Texas was so far from the northern border but in the war between the states that slaveholders and their slaves, 150,000 of them, moved to Texas after the Emancipation Proclamation. So there were more than the usual amount. This is a very interesting country, isn't it? Thomas Jefferson originally wrote into the Declaration of Independence that there would be an ending of slavery of some sort, and yet his whole financial system was based on this very difficult economic system of enslavement. And his moral character found it offensive, and yet he was conflicted enough that he, over his lifetime, had 600 people enslaved under him. It's an interesting history, the United States. Now, the third thing that we're celebrating, 4th of July, Juneteenth, is also Pride Month. In 1969, there was essentially a rebellion of the LGBTQ population at Stonewall, and that became the foundation of the push for the rights of those who, based on their sexuality, had been excluded from being a full-fledged citizen with the rights and privileges, whether it was out and out stated, which it was in some places, or whether it was just practice. The practice of extending freedom to others, unfortunately, has hardly ever come out of just plain generosity. We have had to ask for it, stand for it, and demand it. In the Revolutionary War, there were years of fighting the British. The Civil War, 5 more years. Fortunately, it hasn't been as bloody since, but this process of becoming free has not been easy. And it is worth celebrating every piece of freedom that we have. For while we might be dissatisfied with many things in our lives, we must say that this is a process that is unfolded quite beautifully, in a sense, if we can take the long view and not feel it personally when it's against us. One of the things that happened to me as a child was, I grew up in Sanford, North Carolina, and at that time there were 2 school systems, as there were a lot of things like drinking fountains, bathrooms, the general indignities that people of my race did to the people of the black race were quite numerous and so built into the system that we hardly knew they were happening at the time because we were kind of accustomed to it. But the glaring retrospective inspection of those just shows us how we can be so insensitive to people and treat them as though they were not people. And I think one of the beautiful things about this church, the unity movement in general, is from its beginning it has had no restriction on who could be a minister. I like to tell this story. I was a ministerial student at Unity Village, and that was about the mid-90s, and I looked on the wall there of the very first class, which had been 1906, I think, or something like that, and it was 5 people had been ordained. It might have been 6. I believe it was 6. It was 5 women and 1 gay man. You could tell he was gay. He was like, there was no doubt about it. And it started us on a trajectory which reinforced our deepest beliefs that we are all part of the one presence, one power. We're all part of God. We are all sisters and brothers because we have the same parent. This has been a foundational belief in unity, and we have never had to have a vote whether a gay person could be part of the clergy, or a woman, or a black person, or a brown person, or any other color would not be welcomed. We've had every type of person become a minister in this church. Every type I know of have become ministers. It speaks so well of the underlying foundational belief system professed and expressed in this community. And so one of my hopes when I came back to North Carolina, having been gone for 25 years, having seen a little bit of change before I left, what I really hoped for in the church that I was going to be a minister in is that it would be both black and white. And and now I expand it to everything else you can be. In between colors, in between sexual orientation, rich, poor, lucky, unlucky, old and young. I want everybody to feel like this is their home, that this is their place, blue and red as well. That this is a place where it doesn't matter the texture of your outside. We are here to find what is the core, who you really are, and to celebrate that. It is my belief that when we celebrate that, we come closer to reaching the goals and the aspirations of the Declaration of Independence, which says we're all created equal with certain unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And if we stick to the truth, starting with the core of who we are, the out manifestation of that core should include a state of generosity to all people in the way of acceptance, appreciation, and love. And cooperation will be the biggest thing, that there will be fewer arguments about unessential things, and that we will march forward into a future that we are co-creating or with each other, that we are making, that represents who we are at our core and not what our history has been. For we're the lucky ones to have found a community, to found other people that say either silently or verbally, we agree with you. We trust that you are a child of God, and that as I honor that child in you, that nature, your nature, I will be better. And the times I don't see it, I will work to forgive. And when I have done that, I will work to embrace. So it is my hope that we keep this up. That as we spend more time exploring who we really are at the core of who our being is, as we spend more time in a state of recognition that the true nature of us is actually beyond all that we see, that the true nature of us is something that endures and actually lives in a state of eternity and not in this great arc of history, but has been a baseline for all existence forever and is a baseline for us at this moment. And when we rest and find the peace that passes understanding by being in that state, when we emerge back into the world, we come not as someone trying to overcome their prejudices, but by someone who's trying to express their divinity. And the liberation that brings to us, where we're not in correction mode, but in expression mode, I think will be so rewarding to us that as we march out into the streets or we stay at home, we will be doing the same work, because we will be expressing that which is God-given in us, which is God in us. That will be our legacy. Because we're not struggling so much to make corrections in this room, we can make advancements more easily. That by recognizing who we are at our core, by taking that in as a deep breath, when we exhale love and compassion. And exhaling love and compassion fits the very needs of everyone that we know in the world. For all of us have a life that on the surface that has good days and bad days. It has obstacles to overcome and death to face. And we need something that is more enduring, more permanent, more eternal than just the vacillations of the day. We need to remember that our lives have purpose and are moving towards something. And what we're moving toward as fast as we can at this moment is realizing our true identity. And in this realization, we will become that which we have always wanted: peace, love and happiness, acceptance of the way things are. We will go beyond the complicated expressions of karma and live in the eternal, in the now, in the here. And there will be something about us that will keep us from falling backwards. It seems like this country knows well how to take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And so it is in our lives also, isn't it? We sometimes take a step forward and then we fall back. But I think the longer we hang out in the experience of our oneness with the divine, the less steps back we will be taken. And if we take 1 back, we will know, clearly know, that all is well, no matter what has happened. I want to read you something from Rumi. This one cracks me up. I don't know why it cracks me up, but it does. Trust means you're willing to risk what you already have. I personally have found that this practice of trust has been just a glorious, fun thing for me, because I like to take a chance. And I think my surface is so full of blessings already, I can lose a few, right? So let's just throw ourselves at it. And I believe one of the things, if you look at Jesus, Jesus was an enormous risk taker, talking to the Pharisees and the Sadducees like they were punks and telling them they didn't know nothing, and yet they had been the scholars of the time, right? He was a trusting man. He trusted essentially that no matter what happened to him, he was on the right path. So he walks into Jerusalem trusting that even though he may die in the process of liberation of the minds of the Jews and the Gentiles, even though he may die, he trusts, though he might lose his life, he trusts. And he takes enormous risk, knowing it might, and of course if it had been me, I would have gone, this is going to happen. You know, he did it anyway. Trust. For us to advance, we have to trust. We have to be willing to risk what we have already. You know, one of the very difficult things that's happening in this country right now, especially since the Black Lives Matter movement, is white people are scared to say anything because we have been so bad at saying everything. But to bridge the gap between us, let's just be trusting that in the end all will go well if our intentions are high enough. And if we can take the stares and the snarls that come when it pricks somebody's sensitivities, just trust over time our next steps will be together and not apart. I think that goes for everybody. When we're talking about sexuality, when we're talking about political leanings, when we're talking about our personal lives, with our partners, with our friends, a sense of trust will help us bridge those gaps between each other. I want to read you a poem by Hafiz. The small man builds cages for everyone he knows, while the sage, who has to duck his head when the moon is low, keeps dropping keys all night long for the beautiful, rowdy prisoners. I think we should set our prejudices free. We should say to our prejudices, you know, I came by you honestly. I believe my mother taught me that. Coming back to Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was accused of being an atheist in his time. It was part of the ugly politics of the day. And they were quite ugly, and it was so ugly, as I said a couple of weeks ago, that George Washington wanted to get out of politics and go home and be on his plantation with his 450 slaves. But what they said about Jefferson was he was an atheist because he chose to think freely about religion and to say that he didn't think that the standard Christianity of his day was tolerable for him as his own belief. And so he says, I am a sect unto myself. I make up my own mind. I choose my own way of thinking about God and the world. When I was in ministerial school, we had fun days every once in a while, and one of my professors, which I've told you all before, was very good at imitating Guido Sarducci. And he declared to us one thing, a truth that has stuck with me ever since. Every person a pope. Or as he said, every person a pope. So we were liberated by the boss of our education that we could be free in our thinking. And that's where real freedom lies. Because no one can cage your thoughts if you don't. Only you live inside that world that you have constructed. And while you may affect others, for better or for worse, according to your thoughts, it is your cage if you let it be one. And so the real freedom that I want us to pay attention to when we're in this space, above kindness even, above courtesy, above respect, above love and all that, is let us be alert to the cages we've placed around our own thinking that keep us from seeing the world clearly, from seeing ourselves as children of God, and the core of every person we see, that we cease to see them of what's the texture on the surface, and we recognize that the real basis of who they are, that one presence, that one power. Michael and Anna and I are going to put together a little workshop. I think I told you all about it before. We're all three going to come at it somewhat differently because we all three come at this whole process of being enlightened to our own divinity somewhat differently. But we've all agreed that the path where we want to end up, the destination where we want to end up, is that it will be easier for anyone who has heard what we had to say, that it would be easier for them to go, oh, I get it. I am that one presence. And oh my God, this is the way I do it. I do it this way. This is the way I do it. But we are all on the path. And when you're on the path with others, doesn't it feel better? Right? Then you're thinking you're out there by yourself, the lone person, the struggling person who goes, because the path is a bit convoluted. Now, karma could be part of the problem we have. Michael's going to do a workshop this next Saturday on karma. And I really think one of the things that would be good for you to get, at least this is my, like I said, we come at it somewhat differently, so I'm not going to predict what Michael's going to say, but let me say this on the idea of karma, because I want to get out there before he does. You have the surface, and on the surface things change. On the surface, there's time, there's history, there's cause and effect. These are the rules of the surface of your life. There's the Big Bang, and then there's all the causation that has brought us to this moment. And it's really quite fascinating, and we endlessly can explore this. And that cause and effect, boom, tumbling toward this moment, explains, according, if that's all you're thinking about, I think, the karma story says, this is why it's so, the tumbling of cause and effect to this moment. Good to know. Real freedom, here's my answer, it's not everybody's answer. Real freedom is not only paying attention and doing the best on the surface, but coming to the core of who you are, to that part that was always in the present, always the now, always transcended everything, because it was the awareness or the consciousness that held this up and let it play out. Lets the light and shadow and the good and the bad and the highs and lows and the left and the right and the blue and the gray and the white and the black and the green and the yellow, all that play out. That plays out. But underneath is this one presence that holds the space for everything. And when we shift our full attention away from that for a while to being in this, then we find that peace that transcends understanding. And the very thing you thought you could get by fixing everything over here, you actually find by turning your attention the other way, look, it's here. Because it is me. I am that. And everybody I see is that. And even their dog is that. Everybody, that is the basis of everything. And we can be too confused and too deluded and too tired and too angry and too to turn our attention here, or we can just say, you'll be here when I get back. I'm going to go take a look at the nature of who I am. Because in my understanding, real freedom is not in fixing everything. Real freedom is knowing your true identity. So on this day, when we celebrate this country, we celebrate the 13th Amendment. We celebrate rights of all people to have a life of sexuality according to their needs and desires. When we celebrate that today, let's also look to see that all that surface has been supported by the consciousness that we call God, and yet that consciousness is us as well. And our true freedom is not just a freedom from our troubles, but the freedom to know peace and love and belonging and being. That's the core of who you are, and your freedom lies there. Let us pray. Let's start by doing gratitude. Let us be grateful that the words of Frederick Douglass can be heard in a new light. A few excerpts from his 4th of July speech. Fellow citizens, I'm not wanting in respect for the fathers of this republic. The signers of the Declaration of Independence were brave men. They were great men too, great enough to give frame to a great age. It does not happen often to a nation to rise at one time at such a number of great men. The point from which I am compelled to view them is not certainly the most favorable, yet I cannot contemplate their great deeds with less than admiration. He goes on to talk about the 4th of July is not for him because he does not feel free, because he was not free at the time. He is a person who was emblematic of someone who knew his worth and dignity, yet had been trampled on by the minds and thoughts and actions of others. And so he knew the 4th of July for him was not a thing of freedom because he was not free. And fortunately, I believe we can say that is no longer the case. And fortunately also that we have decided that people of any sexual orientation can marry each other and share in the miseries of marriage like everybody else. So we have much to be grateful for. So now let us also be grateful that we have friends, companions on the path that leads to ultimate freedom. That we are all longing to be free and to experience life as God instead of a creature, as spirit instead of body, as trust and love instead of fear. We are so lucky. And so it is. Amen.
I hope you got something out of today's service. We intend to bring you things that will help you in your life become more of who you want to be, give you the freedom of forgiveness and the hope of expectancy that your life will unfold in a way that brings you joy, happiness, and is a contribution to the world. If you would like to contribute to this ministry, please go to unitytriangle.org, hit the donate button, and it will lead you into an easy way of doing that. We thank you for your attention and look forward to seeing you again here.